I feel like in this day and age, there's a lot of people get in the mindset that you were talking about before of kind of achievement and looking forward. We're fed kind of reasons to do mindfulness, like do it to reduce stress or do it to make yourself more focused, and in kind of corporate situations to work more. I don't think we should fully sacrifice talking about reasons to do things, but do you have a thoughts on if someone doesn't meditate or doesn't cultivate mindfulness, why they might want to consider doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I could just start with myself personally. It's actually taken me many, many years to get into a consistent habit of practicing mindfulness and meditation. So I did it for a while, and I'm the kind of person who find it very hard to stick to and cultivate a habit consistently over a long time. So I did it for a while and practice in the mornings, and then I'd have a headache one day. I wouldn't feel like it, so I wouldn't do it, and then I wouldn't do it the other day, and then the days could end up being weeks and months. And then what happens is that the pain of not doing it becomes greater than the pleasure of actually doing the practice. And the pain for me is just this sense of irritability, actually. Small things irritate me. My level of gratitude goes down. I get frustrated more easily with the world. I get annoyed more easily. My sleep wouldn't be as good. I wouldn't have as much energy as I normally would. Yes, it feels like it's a bit like when you're trying to drive a car and the tires are flat and everything's really rough and you're just shaking. I just thought of that analogy, and everything's shaking. And I guess this is actually quite a good one. I never thought of it. It's a bit like pumping the tires up every day. In fact, my tires are a bit flat at the moment. It's probably what I'm thinking of it. It's a bit like pumping up the tires every day, and things seem to go smoother. That's the way it's worked for me personally. And I'll talk about how I've managed to make it into a habit later, perhaps. But maybe just going through, so first of all, there's loads of studies for anyone who's into the science of anything. For the science of mindfulness, type it into Google Scholar, type mindfulness in the title. In fact, I did that yesterday. There's 63,000 articles or research papers on mindfulness. So it's kind of an exponential growth. And people have found benefits, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I would also say spiritually, and also in the realm of relationships. So physically, there's one classic study they've done where they give two groups. One group, they give both groups a flu shot, actually, and you get an immune reaction happening when you get a flu shot. One group is the control group, the other group is doing an 8-week mindfulness course, and they get a much stronger immune response to it. And there's loads of other research backing that up and finding that your immune system's stronger. So physically, your health seems to be stronger in that way. Interestingly, I don't know if you ever talked about this in your podcast, but about telomeres. I don't know if you've touched on that. Maybe not the caps at the end of genes. So what I think it was a Nobel Prize winning scientist found that basically aging in the body is the caps at the end of the genes gradually wearing out. And they just thought it was a fixed process. But when they did studies on people practicing mindfulness and meditation regularly, they found that the caps at the end of these genes, the telomeres, didn't wear out so quickly. And that's why you see all these monks and nuns walking around looking like they look 21 or 25 when they're actually 103. So the rate of aging slows down, they find, in that way. So that's another physical benefit. Obviously, there's the tensions that release. And then mentally, there's some nice studies where they do it on students and stuff, where they find learning works better. People's memory is more efficient. One of the most interesting studies I found is the front part of the brain and how the activity changed, so the prefrontal cortex. And what they find is that I think it's essentially greater activity in the left prefrontal cortex for people who have greater resilience. And that means people who are more up for, when a difficulty comes up, they see it as a challenge, as an opportunity. They move towards challenge. They find it exciting. They're less likely to be anxious and depressed. And that's people with more activity in the left front part of the brain. And people which have this kind of leaning more towards the right front part of the brain have a greater tendency to avoid difficulties, see challenges as problems, more likely to suffer from mental health challenges as well. But then what they found is doing short mindfulness courses helped to shift that from the right to the left, which was fascinating. And it agreed with people's self-reports on the levels of anxiety and depression. But the really interesting one was when they did this research on a guy called Mathieu Ricard. Don't you, you've heard of him? He's the French translator for the Dalai Lama. And they scanned his brain, and they thought there was something wrong with the machine, actually. So they had to do it a couple of times more. And then when the research came out, the BBC found out, and they said, oh my God, because it's basically so far off the scale. It classifies as like the happiest person in the world. So they're spending ages trying to contact him while he's meditating somewhere in the Himalayas. And eventually he opened his email to discover that all the newspapers in the world want to report on this guy who's the happiest person in the world, who's done, way more than 10,000 hours of meditation practice, maybe 30 or 40,000 hours. So there's that. So there's the kind of these mental and emotional benefits. Interestingly, people feel emotions more. So when you start doing mindfulness, as you become more aware, you notice your emotions more, but you're less likely to be reactive to those emotions. So there seems to be like a space or an opportunity for you to decide rather than to be automatically pulled by a feeling. So imagine, someone says something really rude to you. An automatic reaction is straight away you'd feel the anger, let's say in your stomach. It would come up your chest, through your neck, out of your mouth, and you'd come out with swear words or even a punch or something. But the more mindfulness you do, it may still be there, but you'd really notice it and feel that whole step, and it would actually be more of a conscious choice that you're making to respond or in that situation. So there's that kind of emotional intelligence. There's also that ability to this is a really important skill for relationships, which is to be able to step in another person's shoes and actually, what would it be like from that person's perspective going through this difficulty or challenge? So that is such a key, important skill for healthy emotional relationships. That's been found to improve. And then in the spiritual realm, I'm not sure if we have time to talk too much about it, but I'm very interested in therapy and a training called ACT. Have you heard of ACT? Acceptance and Commitment Training? Yeah, you have. Yeah. And they've actually found 4 different dimensions to mindfulness: acceptance, unhooking from your thoughts, being in the present moment, and the transcendent self, or perspective taking self. And so that, I think, I would just define that as in the spiritual realm personally, but people can see it however they wish. And that seems to really improve many things. I think the likelihood of having a mental health challenge, and if so, how long and how deep, by having this more flexible sense of who we are, a more flexible sense of self. So there's a little spiel on some of the benefits of it.
Yeah, I think common to a lot of that is the thing you said at the end, which is so the mind naturally is, you have this field of consciousness, and then phenomena arising, whether it's anger or the emotions in a relationship, in an argument or something. And what's really happening is there's consciousness and its contents are changing. And we when we're kind of living our lives, we're in a state of kind of delusion. We're not tending to see that. We're identified with the feelings, right? The anger comes up, and we imbue it with a sense of reality, and we act from that place. And I think that's when you're very much just kind of caught in the flow of life, and you're not really seeing, you're not giving yourself the kind of the space to access the ground of really what's happening, which is that there's awareness, and then these things arise, and you can choose how to act from there. So I think a common theme maybe is, experientially for me, it feels like home base. It feels like it gives me a ground to rest on in just awareness, and seeing the kind of flow of phenomena in awareness, so that in all these different situations, you always have access to that, and you are grounded, instead of being kind of knocked off your feet and always tumbling from emotion to thought and all this other stuff. And I think tied up with that is that when you're in that state of kind of usual everyday waking consciousness, there's a kind of ambient stress where you're trying to control things and make things a certain way. But when you surrender, all of our health, all of our kind of ability to heal, it all comes from being a natural organism that kind of balances itself and balances its relationship with its environment, right? So if you first hear this laundry list of health benefits, it might seem strange. Like, what is it about paying attention that, makes my telomeres like improve and, solves all this other stuff? But from the perspective of thinking about just bringing your body into harmony, I think that's really a deep wisdom, is just surrendering can have all of this psychological and kind of physiological health giving, benefits as well.